Okay, everyone, we're back for another HAF Reacts. I realize I've not actually introduced myself ever. I'm Matt McDermott. We're here to talk about two things today, JD Vance and JD Vance's comments about his wife's lack of Christian faith and asking her to, come to his way of thinking as a vice president. And we're going to get to Zohran Mandani's win in New York City because we've been asked to weigh in on that so many times. And now that he's won, we're going to talk about all of that, at least in some detail. So let's go with JD. Who wants to start? Suhag, we tweeted as an organization, but you also went in personally. What's your take?
Yeah, there's been a lot of kind of mixed reaction. One coming from the racists telling us to, leave this country and, take our demon religion with us. And then there's those like who are from within the community who are like, this is ridiculous. You're, making a big deal out of this. You don't understand the fundamentals of Christianity in spite of living in this country. And that's the one, you expect what the racists say, but that's that middle group, I think. And there's of course the ones that are condemning it. But condemning it for a variety of reasons. It's that middle group where I'm like, you clearly don't know how to read, because that's not what I said. I didn't say that we were offended because as a Christian, who many Christians hold that sharing the gospel, sharing the truth, whatever, is a religious calling, or you're supposed to be doing that. That's not what the issue was. The issue is that he is the vice president, not the vice pastor, and he was essentially throwing red meat to a crowd of like hungry students. And the picture that came to mind was like a gladiator, stadium or coliseum. And there's Usha, who's not a damsel in distress. She's a powerful woman who's more qualified than he is. But him just kind of throwing her at them saying, hey, I want your approval.
Hmm. Raj, Samir, anything? Raj, you wrote a piece today we published. Want to weigh in on that? Give people a taste.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some, very interesting reactions, within the community coming out of this, and a lot of it centered around sort of the difference between a second generation and a first generation perspective, and a lot of second generation voices were pointing out that perhaps Indians or Indian born people in the community don't really get that in the U.S. Religious conversion is seen very much as an individual choice. It's not seen as some norm that kind of maintains a communal or demographic stasis or détente among very disparate communities. And so even though it is someone as high profile as Usha Vance, who is obviously a public profile, married to the vice president, that ultimately is still an individual decision. And that's something that's, that's fine. I mean, again, like Suhag was saying, we're not offended by Christian beliefs. As living in this country, we know that Christianity and there are other traditions that believe that they have the path to salvation and they want to share that with others. And so that's not what we're begrudging. And we're certainly not asking the American government to play a role as a referee in religious disputes. I mean, that's definitely not what we want to get into. All we're saying is like, how hard is it for a vice president or anyone else to say that we have religious liberty in America? You can pursue your own spiritual path, and for some people, that spiritual path is Hinduism. I mean, that's not that hard. I mean, Sarah Huckabee Sanders today posted this very nice like Diwali message, right? And if she can do it, I mean, I think other people can do it. It's not that hard,
Yeah,
especially if you have a Hindu wife or an agnostic wife.
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing to me that I think that you hit on that really is a big thing for me is not actually, as you were both saying, the righteousness or whatever around Christian belief, or that he wants her to come around to it. To me, it's like that he's airing this stuff in public. He's the vice president. He's supposed to be representing all of us. And he's going on about some personal thing in a public forum. He had to know that. And to me, it just kind of came off as tone deaf, as realizing tone deaf to how the Hindu community might take that, or any religious minority community might take that has a history of interacting with people or saying, we know the right way. And let me tell you about it.
The other piece of this is that he's lying. I mean, I think a few days before he was named as the vice presidential pick, there's an interview of Usha Vance and JD Vance in, I think, their living room. And they talk about one, her having been raised in a religious family, not an agnostic one, and that she acknowledges that religion was a force for good. I mean, those are not the exact words she used, but religion made her parents good people, and that she saw the value of it. So um, that's already been talked about. They also talked about in another interview, I think with I think Meghan McCain on her podcast recently. Usha Vance talked about how they're raising their children exposed to both traditions. Granted, they might go to church, the kids are going to be baptized. Those are certain promises. I know from friends and family who are in interfaith marriages that if you are part of the Catholic Church, you do have to sign certain contracts that you will remain active in the church and you will do your best to raise your children Catholic. So that's a commitment that he has made. But she also talked about, exposing the kids, including on a recent trip to India, to Hindu religiosity and
Yeah,
Hindu
I've
spirituality.
seen those photos. I mean, just to bring it back to HF, this is our stuff. Uh, We even have staff members we have a couple staff, one, how many? That are in interfaith marriages, and one is a Hindu man married to somebody that's Catholic. And so this is something that comes up. It lets the community or any watchers think this is something we're very familiar with, and we engage with regularly. Samir, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is that I haven't eaten lunch yet, and it's almost 2 p.m. PST, so I'm very angry right now. I'm angrier than usual. I just wanted to get that out for the record. But that being
Good,
said,
good, 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 good.
I think there are two other points here. I think one, at its baseline level, I think this is political opportunism, right? I think post Charlie Kirk's murder and really the ascendancy of Turning Point, and that kind of like very hardcore Christian right, you see that he's basically playing to that base, right? And I think, whether what he said was calculated in the moment or not, or whether he believes it or not, or whatever he's saying, I think he sees which way the trends are shifting, and I think it was a politically opportune moment for him, and that's why he made the comments in the way he did. And I think, while we and a lot of other people have found problems with it, I think a lot of people actually loved it, right? And I think it played into their narrative about what it means to be an American, and that's tied to what religion you should be and you should be espousing, and where there shouldn't be a place for other religious communities. So I think from that perspective, it was a political move. Whether it's savvy in the long term or not, I think only time will tell. I think the other point I do want to mention here, and I think you guys pointed out, hey, there's those that have been, opposed to what he said and condemned it. Then there are those that are the pure racists that, loved it. And then there are, I think there was a third poll or a third section or segment that you pointed out that are kind of within the community, Hindu American community, that where we kind of saw that generational divide. I think there's yet another segment of the population, and that's kind of this like far left progressive South Asianist movement. You have your ABCDs of organization names, but they're actually gaslighting Hindus now, in the context of that statement, saying you unleashed this yourself. It's your fault, like victim blaming and victim shaming, right? Just because some people, like every other minority community, moved to the right at the time of the last election because they were fed up with what they saw in the Democratic Party or some of the far left's policies. And so they shifted more, and you saw a lot more support for Republicans. And there was a much broader coalition that actually, probably helped Trump in many states come to power. And so now that's the fault of the entire Hindu community, is collective blame and collective shaming of the community. So I think that's also a very dangerous thing that's come out. And we've seen that as a consistent trend with a lot of things that have been happening in the last, now it's been 11 months. God, we haven't even been a year into this administration, but
It hasn't been here yet.
I know, right? Seriously. Whether it's been immigration policies around the H-1B stuff, or it's been just a general hate that's come towards the community, there's a lot of that victim shaming that's been, directed towards us from the far left South Asianist progressives.
And it really doesn't make sense because it's India and Americans were not the only one who shifted towards Trump. I mean, a lot of people have been pointing this out, that there was a broad coalition of many different minority communities that shifted towards Trump, even among Asian Americans, if you look at it. I mean, I saw polls where a 20-point shift among Chinese Americans, Filipino Americans, Vietnamese Americans. In fact, Vietnamese and Filipino Americans, if I recall correctly from one poll, went for Trump at a much higher rate at a noticeably higher rate than Indian American Democrats. Now, what is very interesting is if you look at Edison, New Jersey today, I know we'll get to Mamdani in a bit, but like, yeah, maybe you could say that, okay, they went 30%, 30 points towards Trump in 2024. And then they saw what, happened, and they voted for Trump. And then a bunch of people said, oh, you pee pee poo poo people, get out of my country. And now they shifted back toward Democrats by a huge margin. I think it was in the 70s. And so like clearly, you know, like clearly, Indian voters are voters, right? Like they, if you appeal to them, they'll vote for you. If you piss them off, they'll punish you at the polls.
Well, and I hope they get both parties get the message that identitarian politics is a losing strategy. Because a lot of people that we were talking to that did shift right, did so because of hateful rhetoric against Hindus, including Hindu members of Congress, Hindu staffers in presidential campaigns, attacks coming from them from the far left of the party, and silence essentially in and not defending them. That was seen. States like California passing laws that would single out and target Indian Americans. That was seen, and affiliated with the left. And so people moved right. And now we're seeing kind of that same sort of ugliness on the right. And at least early indicators are that people are shifting back to the left. What I'd like to see is actually just focusing on what it is to be American, and having a broad view of that in the same way that the founding fathers did when they, laid down things like, religious freedom, equal protection, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, it's an experiment, and we make mistakes, and we rectify those mistakes as well. We're not a perfect union, but I hope that both parties get the message and just quit this and call it out and just refocus on the things that are important.
Yeah, I think on the left, what you see is that this complete dismissal of of a holistic or comprehensive American identity. And then on the far right, what you see is no, the American identity is X, Y, and Z, and only X, Y, and Z. And everyone else gets squeezed in the middle. And I think and I read that somewhere, I can't recall the article, but it's basically you've seen the destruction of the middle in both parties. And that's, I think, is what's increasingly scary, is that comments like what you saw from JD Vance, and which are becoming more and more common. I know we're going to get to Mamdani in a minute. Those types of comments play to those extreme bases. And that's what, whether it's social media or otherwise, that's what people are lapping up. And I think that's reflective at a minimum that the middle doesn't have a place, at least in popular politics, on both sides. And both, I think, parties are acting in a very populist manner, but not in a good way, in a way of, basically whipping up rhetoric, whipping up hate. And regardless of who who the target of that hate is, the problem is that there's no common sense. There's no, hey, let's just find policies that we can agree on as all Americans that are good for our country and for our families and for our economy, et cetera. And so it's just kind of like scoring points now. And that's all you see on both sides.
Yeah, totally. You both mentioned hate, online hate from the right, people coming out, what it means to be American. I confess, I don't actually have a personal Twitter account anymore, because the thing is like, heroin to me. If I go all in, it's going to get me in this vice grip and I'll never get out. So I don't even do it. But this weekend with the JD Vance stuff, I actually managed our Twitter page and was glued to it all weekend, much to the chagrin of my son. But that made me see a whole bunch of tweets and the sort of stuff that's out there. I just wanted to bring some of these up to show people, because it's something. Let's just look at this. So here we go. We got, what is this? We are a Christian nation. It's incumbent upon you to assimilate to our culture. If that's too much of us to ask of you, maybe America is not the place for you. So we've got that. Let's see, what else do we have?
That's kind of tame, quite honestly.
That's a very
Hey,
polite one.
to viewers, I've just got these open in an order, and sometimes Riverside seems to screw up my order when I'm sharing. Let's go. You can only be American or Hindu, not both. That one's fun. Yeah. Let's see. Here we're just gonna bring up, no, not that. Here we go. This was my favorite meme we've got. Eat the
Yes.
Jeet. Yeah, there we go.
What country or group is that brown character supposed to be representing?
I don't know. It looks like it might be out of Aladdin, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go for it, Raj. I don't have anything important to say. Go for it.
I mean, like, I even saw tweets that were like, Harmeet Dillon, the evil Hindu, get rid of her. And I'm like, he's like, why does she have this Hindu prayer? She had that Hindu demon chant. And I was like, no, I don't think that's what Attorney
Well,
General, Assistant Attorney General does.
talking about just I don't know, identity crisis. You have conservatives like Dinesh D'Souza, who was almost gleeful retweeting kind of anti-Hindu tweets. There was a tweet where there was like a large Ganesh procession with a deity, and he's like, we need less of this in the country, or something along that lines. And then all of a sudden, the Twitterati turned around and said all Indians need to go home, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, oops, that's me too, right? And so now all of a sudden, he's calling out the anti-Indian hate on the right. Meanwhile, he had already been participating in anti-Hindu hate from the right.
Yeah, I mean, I just have two larger questions. Number one, the people that create all these posts, do they actually have jobs, or is this like all?
They certainly don't have followers. I mean, that's a bigger point. I was talking to a reporter about this morning, talking about this, is that I don't know how deep this goes, and I really think we need to know. But some of these people, they get like 25 views, they got like 300 followers, which is nothing in Twitter land. And so it's a bunch of people screaming. I mean, and one we were called future deportees, which was interesting. Another one, we got a couple that were from people describing themselves as heritage Americans, which for those people that don't know is people that can trace their heritage back before the Revolutionary War. JD Vance can. And I just find it's funny because I just recently found out, you all know this, I've talked about it, is that my family, my earliest relative goes back to 1639. So I can out heritage you. And I'm sitting here being like, people are a little bit crazy here. This isn't what the country was actually founded on. It was about people coming from England who were persecuted for their religious beliefs to found something else. So let's just move on from
There's
I
this.
also
mean, we were all subjects
DEI.
of the British Empire a few generations ago, right? All of us were.
There's also, I don't know if you've seen the DEI thing where it's deport every Indian. So that's another
that's
that's
fun
clever.
one.
That's
yeah,
cute.
I mean, I do, Raj, I do appreciate when people are being hateful and cute at the same time. As a writer, I appreciate the badness of it.
Yeah, I mean, credit where credit's due, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a
entirely.
reverse relationship. The more hateful, the more stupid. At least that's what I've been seeing online.
Hmm.
I really watched.
Interestingly, I did see somebody who proudly described themselves as anti-Semite coming after us in their description, all
Yes.
caps, anti-Semite, and she was an Orthodox Christian too, which left me with scratching my head.
But there are people who are legitimately influencers, and that to me is cause for concern, right? Like folks like Dinesh D'Souza, who's served in administrations, has a very high public profile, and now he's concerned about Indians, but he was jumping in when it was anti-Hindu hatred. That's a problem.
Also, wasn't it what's her name? Nikki Haley's son or something like that was like
Yes.
lapping some of that stuff too. I mean, these guys are idiots, right? I mean,
Naileen or something? Naileen Haley?
yeah,
Yeah,
whatever his
yeah.
name was.
Whatever his
Oh.
name is,
Irrelevant.
yeah.
He's irrelevant. I mean, these guys are just stupid.
Okay, I feel like
Told you I'm angry.
You're angry. You're hangry. We need to get you some food. I
Let's
feel like
talk
our
about
energy.
Mandani then.
The JD Vance was such a high over this weekend. I feel like we're going down. Let's bring ourselves back up to a height of commentary with Zohran Mandani.
The first Hindu mayor.
The first Hindu mayor. What are you talking about? Who
Well,
said that?
you didn't see the Cuomo.
No.
I tweeted that because the Cuomo, I guess, had some Muslim supporters, who said that basically Zohran flip-flops his religious identity. I mean, to
No,
be
he
fair,
doesn't.
his mother is Hindu and his father is
Yeah.
Muslim. So, but they said he's a Sikh if he's in a Gurdwara, he's a Hindu if he's in a mandir, and he's a Muslim if he's in a masjid. So, yeah, it's pretty entertaining. You can see the video. It's on my timeline. So yeah, I said it tongue in cheek. He obviously identifies as Muslim.
He entirely. I think he also said Palestine was the cornerstone of his politics at some point. I wanted to just share to kick off this discussion because I know we've had a lot of hand wringing internally at HAF, and we've been circumspect in what we say because we're a nonprofit. We can't actually endorse people, and we've been waiting to see. But I was reading The Spectator this morning. Yes, I read The Spectator. That's where my brain goes. And I just wanted to share that. Can you all see that? Yes, you can. Okay. So if you think this is by, let me scroll down, by Charles Lipson, and I just think this is funny. If you think America doesn't permit assisted suicide, you haven't been watching the New York mayoral election. The city is deliberately killing itself. The country's largest city, its financial and media capital, had a choice among three truly dreadful candidates: deeply tarnished former governor, a Republican who runs in every election except homecoming queen. It's very true.
That's
And he does love his cats. And had no chance of winning this one, but refused to withdraw. And a young socialist with a winning smile, dreamy programs, Islamist allies, and zero administrative experience. Predictably, New York voters chose the absolute worst. Zohran Mamdani won handily, um, which I think sums it up, actually. Um, he, I was talking about this, and wherever you stand on it, to me, his lack of experience comes out, shows itself in the fact that he wants to arrest Bibi Netanyahu for his international arrest warrant, which does exist. But the man's mayor of New York City. The United States is an ally of Israel. If you think that's going to go over well or is good policy, you are an idiot. You just don't understand the way the world works, which I think can be said of many of his other policies. Suhag, Samir, I know you want to talk about this. What do you think? Now that he's elected, we can weigh in on potential policy things. What do we want to look out for, Hindus to look out for Zohran Mamdani?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say the first thing is that, you know, let's see if he actually, kind of along the lines of what you're saying, he actually stays within his mandate of, running a city, right? And the biggest role of a mayor of a city is being an administrator, right? How is he going to administer various policies dealing with infrastructure, dealing with housing, dealing with, health and human services, et cetera, improving quality of life and all that? Or is he just going to be using these talking points, right? That's easy to do when you're in an election, right? Oh, I'm going to arrest this person. I'm going to arrest that person. It plays to his base, which is kind of a weird collection of people and groups, some groups that have openly been talking and bragging about how much that they've been doing as 501c3s for his campaign. So I think that should be looked into, hint, hint. But, that being said, those are talking points for an election. Let's see now what you're actually going to do with one of the, if not the most important city in the world, and how are you going to administer it, right? And so that's kind of from a larger perspective, right? Like if I was in New York, that's what I would be watching, as the first thing, is that what's going to happen to my daily life and quality of life of myself, my children, the education system, et cetera, et cetera. As the Hindu American Foundation, I think we're also concerned about, is he going to try to implement policies that are going to be inequitable in nature towards some groups? He's very openly talked about his disdain for, Israel, India, but within that, there's a lot of like, beneath the surface, a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric, a lot of anti-Hindu rhetoric. I mean, he's showed up at rallies where basically Khalistani supporters have been calling Hindus like bastards, etc. And he's just like there with his like, stupid smile on his face, nodding along. And so, the question is going to be, what policies are actually going to be implemented on the ground, and how is that going to impact different communities, right? Is that going to impact Hindu Americans? So for instance, when he was in the state legislature, during which role he did nothing, he was one of the authors of a piece of caste legislation. Is he going to try to do similar things as the mayor of New York City? Is he going to do things that are going to disproportionately impact certain aspects or certain members of the Hindu community that may be in certain professions or versus others? So that's, I think, what I'm going to be watching for most importantly, is how does this impact, number one, New York City, and more broadly, Americans that are, in that city, and what are the trends that are going to be maybe going to other cities after that? But also, how is this going to directly impact, if at all, Hindu Americans in the city?
I'll also just remind people that, when Jennifer Rajkumar was the first assembly member, Hindu American woman, Hindu American also, I'd have to fact check that, but I think she was the first Hindu American New York Assembly member, and if not, at least the first Hindu American woman to uh, achieve that. And he ran a campaign against her. I mean, she was very new. She had an impeccable record of service, whether it was helping immigrants, whether it was, as a civil rights attorney, and also in local government. And he ran ugly campaigns calling her a Hindu fascist, getting, his local supporters to go after her for no reason whatsoever. So, what I remember the first time I, posted something where I, someone who has been raising a lot of funds for her and runs a nonprofit, a 501c3, um, raises money for him rather, immediately labeled me as Islamophobic. I'm not talking about anything related to his religion. What we're criticizing is his past actions. And I think that I can see that being a challenge, that so often if people are making critiques about the types of, identitarian self-interest groups that he has cozied up with, or actual policies that he is promoting, that when people criticize it, it's automatically just kind of dismissed as, oh, you're being Islamophobic. This has nothing to do. He can pray however many times a day he wants. He can pray wherever he wants. But if he is engaging in divisive identitarian politics, if he is promoting policies that are harming New Yorkers or treating one group differently than another, then, it's going to be valid critique, and it has nothing to do with his religion.
Yeah, I mean, I think I, my my opposition to many of his foreign policy positions aside, I think he's tapped into something that are very real issues in New York. Cost of living things, public transit, all these things. But I've come to taking it's like Zohran Mamdani, right issues, wrong solutions most of the time.
So I think I want to take this back to even sort of this earlier second gen versus first gen debate, because there were some Hindus that did speak. There was Hindus for Zohran, which was associated with that 501c3 organization. There were also various Hindus that were quoted as being opposed to him or concerned about Mamdani. But again, it's, if you are concerned about these issues, if you're concerned about his record on Hindu issues, also look at what was the game that was played. How did you show up to this battle? How did you sell your arguments? Because right now, you can lament or you can complain about whatever happened, but you can also kind of pick yourself up and figure out figure out how you move forward. Right? I mean, he clearly had a sense of aesthetics. He clearly built a really big coalition. Like you said, Matt, he tapped into the fact that there are a lot of people who don't feel a stake in the system the same way that they used to. And so when you don't feel a stake in the system, when you feel like the rent is too damn high, when you don't really have any trust in any of the institutions that you've been growing up with, and if you especially have an issue with who is, running things at the White House, then, why are you going to support, someone who you don't believe is really fresh or new? And that's was the narrative. And he was there at the right time. He didn't really obsess over whether he's really this or that. He built a coalition. He put forward, he promoted a set of values and a set of policy positions that he knew would draw in people, and he did it, right? And so, and again, he mentioned Nehru. He mentioned, in his victory speech, he talked about poetry governing in prose. I believe that might trace back to Mario Como, if I'm not mistaken, which would be pretty ironic. But that is actually a very interesting thing to bring up, because Nehru, of course, is very famous for kind of his cosmopolitanism, his assimilation to British culture. I believe he went to, was he Cambridge or
Cambridge?
It was Cambridge,
I think. Yeah.
Cambridge, right? So very impeccable English, part of a really long tradition of Indian leaders that are like that. And they say the right things that people want to hear. They sound really well at cocktail parties, and they sound like they care about values such as democracy. But then they also annex Goa. Then they also pass emergency. Then they also pass laws on sedition. They arrest political opponents. They invade other countries. They literally, like, Indira Gandhi literally invaded, East Pakistan, created Bangladesh, right? She invaded the Sikh temple at Amritsar. Like, all of the Khalistanis that are going on right now, they're not pissed off about what happened in India under a Modi. They're pissed off at what happened, by the daughter of someone that Zohran Mamdani quoted in his victory acceptance speech, right? So, again, it's like, Bill Clinton, Gavin Newsom, Barack Obama, all sorts of people say that they're transformational. They build coalitions. They bring a lot of people's hopes up. Even AOC is very similar, right? Also took advantage at the right time. But then what ended up happening once they got into power?
Yep.
So maybe
And
that's the good news. If you really don't like Zohran, maybe he will not keep his promises and you'll end up being just like Cuomo in like 10 years. Who knows?
well, I was just going to say, going back to the inexperience, there's a lot of things that he actually doesn't have, that he made a lot of promises about that he doesn't have the power to do. So um, maybe someone can hand him a manual to let him know what he can and cannot do as mayor.
Hmm. Samir, anything closing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that, and this is, I guess, outside of just the Hindu American scope, right? I think when you have politicians that pretend to be who they're not, right? I mean, this guy hasn't spent a day in his life where he didn't experience economic privilege, right? I mean, he comes from a very well-to-do family. His mother, for God's sakes, is a, prominent, Indian film director, and his father's a professor, I believe. Is that at
I
Cornell?
got Columbia.
Yeah.
Columbia. Ivy League professor. I mean, the guy is like grown up with a silver spoon in his mouth, and yet he's trying to portray himself as somebody that really actually understands the needs and the concerns of your everyday, people that are actually feel the pinch, right? I mean, he actually moved into a poor neighborhood. That wasn't like something that people choose to do, right? That's only out of necessity. People live where they are because that's what their financial limitations dictate. But he did it because he wanted to portray himself as somebody he's not, right? And so I think that's the thing that's kind of become very apparent about him is that, how many masks is he actually wearing, right? Like, who is Zohran Mamdani and what does he actually believe? Or does he just believe in power? And is that something that he's going to take on whatever identity, say whatever is necessary just to achieve that? And once he's in that position, then none of that matters anymore. So, this behind the slick campaigning and the Instagram candidate, narrative and all that stuff, there's very, very little substance. There's very, very little policy prescription for all of those problems, which are very real problems for New Yorkers. So, it's easy to say that stuff. Yeah, let's see what happens. And then we will see if the people of New York hold him accountable, right? I think that's the most important thing. People need to hold him accountable. And we saw that, not far from where I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the San Francisco previous mayor was recalled because they were not fulfilling their promises. And there's a new mayor that's doing a much better job, both from the same Democratic Party. So let's hope that people in New York hold him accountable one way or the other. If he does good, then great. And if he treats everyone equally, great. If he doesn't, then people in New York need to hold him accountable for that as well.
But the challenge will be is like so to, some of the main groups that were opposing him where there were a lot of Jewish organizations that came out against Zohran, and then there were some Hindu organizations that came out against Zohran. And the challenge is going to be like there was extremely huge turnout in New York. I think over 2 million people, right? And when you take the list of issues that they care about, right, you basically the argument, and we just have to be really honest about it. The argument you have to make is that these issues, right, that we are talking about are something that you need to prioritize in your list of things that you do. Right now, for some people, that's a very easy case, right? Other people, you still have to make that sale. And so, but again, I would say kind of within the community, and we're talking about sort of like a postmortem, if that's how you view the outcome, is like, these are people who were probably your family members, your friends, right? Your children, your colleagues, right? So there is a disconnect, and instead of sort of dismissing them as, oh, they betrayed us or they're doing this or that, it's like, look at them, kind of take a page from the Christian playbook and view them as people who haven't been saved yet. View them as souls that you have yet to deliver to salvation, if you will, right? Because like we have to actually make a sale. Like no one is entitled. We're not entitled to people's support.
What was the final? I mean, it wasn't 50-50, but it wasn't like 70-30 either.
No. It was actually fairly close off the top of my head, maybe 10 percentage points. It
Yeah,
wasn't
I
great.
think there was just a 10%.
47, 40, or 41, or something like it was in. They both
It was
had.
pretty close. So I think that's one thing that, is Zohran Mamdani going to, lead in a way that brings people together? It's an opportunity and hopefully he'll take it. The other thing is that New York is a resilient city. And so, 3-4 years, change is slow. A little bit of the gloom and doom, I think, is it's just kind of getting caught up. But you know, some voters made this choice, and now the city will have to just see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing I'll say on this is that I think what is also concerning, besides some of the foreign policy positions and some of the statements that he's made, is some of the, let's just say, questionable characters that he's been affiliated with that may have
Funding.
foreign ties from a funding perspective, as well as just what they're involved in. So I think that is also just concerning, just from a legal perspective and just compliance with American laws.
Yeah, it would be really just such an administrative internal headache if you guys had started some little organization to raise money for some your whatever Noron candidate, right, in some other city. And then, you had to make me sit there and account, and be like, no, you didn't use this pen that you brought it for the HAF, for this campaign. You actually only use it for nonpartisan things. And then I have to sit there and talk to the auditors and get a receipt for that. I mean, please don't. It's just we have enough to do.
Hmm. I am going to have to end that there. I just got a text message from my 13-year-old son saying life or death situation, which is
Boy.
how which is how some people feel about Zohran's campaign. So there we go.
And I have
Thank
to
you.
eat, which is a life and death situation for me.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know. Okay. Hey, thank you all. We will, for listeners, we'll be back next week if there's something to talk about. Thanks so much.
Later.
Bye, y'all.